Well, no need to delay any longer. Mary Phagan has officially joined us on stage. Mary, are you familiar with Spaces? If not, you have to unmute yourself to talk, and then once you're done speaking, if you remute yourself, although you're probably going to be doing most of the talking, so definitely welcome you to the space. So thank you so much for joining us. Let me know if you can figure out the mic situation.
I think I can. Did you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. You sound great.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us on behalf of myself and Keith and everybody here at JQ Radio. Your story has been one that a lot of us have known about for a very long time, although I think how most people understand the story is through the meme that I shared in the Jumbotron, which is at the top of the space. There's a place where you can link posts, and I've shared what most people are going to be familiar with out of your story. And I kind of wanted to start there and then give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself and maybe correct or launch from that point, because I think the audience best understands your story from that from this meme that has been circulating. But why don't you give a quick introduction, and maybe for people who aren't familiar with your situation, kind of introduce the overall story of what's happened, and then we'll dive into the specifics, because there's a lot to get into, an amazing amount.
Yeah, I took more notes than ever. And again, everyone, please retweet this bad boy right now for Mary joining us and everything. And again, quote tweet and just quote tweet live with Mary Phagan, ADL Leo Frank. And thank you, Mary, for joining us so much.
And thank you for having me. I'm excited to inform the world now what is happening with the possibility of Leo Frank getting an exoneration in Georgia through the Innocence Project, arranged by tactics with the ADL, the governor, former Governor Roy Barnes, a Rabbi LeBeau, and they're going through the Innocence Project, and it's also Fannie Willis's, the Fulton County DA, who has undermined Trump and others with the open records request. And I just applied for open records request to get this information, and I was denied. They said they were exempt because it's an ongoing investigation. Well, it shouldn't be an ongoing investigation. Leo Frank was convicted in 1913 for the murder of my great aunt. She was only 13 years old, and all the courts, he went to the full Supreme Court. He had 13 of them, and every one of the courts did not feel that he was not guilty. They felt he was guilty. They didn't address the sentence at all. So that's what's happening now. There's a lot more to it, of course, and the battle that has begun. And as you are probably well aware of, I don't go out advertising who I am, but I will not let them smear little Mary Phagan now, which they are doing, in order to get to their point that the black man, Jim Conley, was the murderer of Mary Phagan, and they say they have evidence to prove it, which I know that is not true. I'm sure they're using the 1982 Alonzo Mann statement where he said he was his office boy and he saw Jim Conley with the body of Mary Phagan on the first floor, and that attributed to a posthumous pardon given in 1986 by the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board without addressing his guilt or innocence.
So that is, we're kind of getting way into the thick of it, and of course I know you're probably the most concerned about the more modern updates, but I kind of want to take the
one
audience
second,
back.
Canadian, real quick too, because
sure,
Brother Nathaniel just DM'd me. I don't know if he's still down there. If you are Brother Nathaniel, again, nothing against you. Canadian set this up. Mary's gracious enough to be here, so I don't think we're gonna take any people up for now until afterwards, possibly if Mary wants to take questions and all that. And just for the rest of the audience, in case you guys know, because I do obviously feel bad and I get how it is. But Brother Nathaniel just said, every time I come in, I request to speak and I get shot down. But it's nothing against you, Brother Nathaniel, or anyone. Obviously, we're going to roll with this. And then if Mary has time, we'll take questions, and Canadian's in charge. So we'll go from there. But just wanted to let everyone know that. And again, thank you everybody for retweeting and everything. Appreciate it. Sorry, Canadian.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Keith. Yeah, just to reiterate what he said, this is entirely up to Mary. If she wants to take questions from the general audience, we'll do so at the end if time permits. We've got a lot to get through here, so I don't want to bring up guest speakers and have the space kind of taken in 100 directions. Mary's got a lot of information to share, and she's got her her revision of her book being published again, coming up hopefully soon. I think maybe next month if rumors are accurate, but I'll let you touch onto that a bit more, Mary. But
Does she have a hard out on time, or do we not know?
I'm not sure. Mary,
Mary,
do you have a hard time?
What does that mean?
Do you like have any time you have to leave specifically, or?
No, I'm home, and the VA has covered me for for taking care of my caregiver responsibilities for my husband. So I'm available as long as you want me,
Perfect.
Fantastic.
and I will take questions.
Amazing. Okay, so there you go, audience. If you're interested in asking Mary some questions, please stick around to the end. We'll try to get through as much of it as we can. There's so much to talk about, and I've listened to the various podcasts that Mary has done, read a lot of the stuff that she's published. So there's a whole bunch that we need to get into here. So just be patient. If you've got some things you want to ask, we'll try to get to it at the end. Mary, so what I wanted to do, like I said, is kind of start the audience off from the beginning. And like I said, kind of launch from the point that they're most familiar with, which would be that meme that goes around. And I have it, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'll kind of read it out to you. And all it is just a 3-panel slide. It introduces Leo Frank as the president of the Atlanta chapter of the B'nai B'rith, the superintendent of the National Pencil Company. It says that Mary was a 13-year-old Catholic girl working at a pencil factory, and that he raped and murdered her during the Jewish holiday of Pesach Sheni, the second Passover on April 26, 1913. And then after he was lynched, a group of Jewish attorneys from Chicago got together and formed the ADL in order to prevent people from critiquing the Jewish people and their practices, is how the story goes. So maybe we'll start there. There's a couple claims in here that I want you to maybe touch on. One of them being that this was over the Jewish holiday of Pesach Sheni. Is that something that's been confirmed, or is this more like lore or rumor that circulates around the story itself? Or is this even something central to the story?
I don't think it's essential to the story, because actually what it was Confederate Memorial Day for our Southern veterans during the war between the states. And that was the holiday that she was celebrating and that she got ready for, so that she could go visit the parade after she got her paycheck of $1.20.
Okay, good to know. I mean, this is why it's so important, because the real story has so much disgusting truth inside of it that we don't need things that aren't true to cloud the story itself. This truth is strong enough to stand on its own. That's part of the reason why I wanted to address this meme, is because it does seem that maybe there's some things in there that we don't need to have in order to tell this story. So I just wanted to let the audience see that, and also to let you have a chance to kind of address it, because ultimately this is, while it's not necessarily your story, it is your family's story, it's your ancestors' story. And if anyone should set the record straight, it should be you.
Yes, and I believe that strongly, and that is my destiny, and I've always felt that since I found out about the murder of little Mary, ironically, at the age of 13. The Phagan family never spoke about it. And by the way, I just wanted to let you know she was not Catholic. I'm Catholic because of my mom, who is Italian, 100% Italian. And my father had to sign papers when he married her that his children would be raised as Catholic. So I wanted to clarify that one as well. So when I found out about little Mary Phagan, my dad was in the military, Air Force, military brat, in Charleston, South Carolina. When we moved there, I went to R.B. Stall High School, and my science teacher, Mr. Henry, at that time, most teachers just lined you up and never even looked at your face. They just said, okay, you're next, 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 next. So I was standing in line, and I said, Mary Phagan. And he got quiet, and he pointed his pencil at my name, and he said, there was a little girl in the 1920s that was murdered with your name in Atlanta. Are you by chance related to her? I told him, no, sir, I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm 13, and the boys started teasing me and tell me I was dead and I was reincarnated, and I was just upset so bad that I cried all the way home because of the situation. What they were telling me, that who wants to be dead? I'm not reincarnated. I no, 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 no. Daddy happened to be home, which is very rare for him. He was always busy, and he flew for the Air Force. He was a flight engineer. So I came home and I said, Daddy, Mr. Henry says that there was a little girl that was murdered in Atlanta with my name, Mary Phagan. He became very quiet and very colored in his face of shock. And he said, and I asked, am I related? He said, You go back to school tomorrow and you tell Mr. Henry that yes, you are related to little Mary Phagan that was murdered in 1913 by Leo Frank, the superintendent of the National Pencil Company, on April 26, Confederate Memorial Day. He was convicted of the crime. He was lynched, and I want you to go back and tell him that yes, you are related. Well, I'm only 13. You can imagine being 13. A lot of things don't make sense at that age, and for me, it just went in one ear and out the other, and I knew I would never, ever be asked that question again. Boy, was I wrong. So he got reassigned, he retired, and he decided that we would move back to Atlanta, Georgia, because grandfather was getting ill, and he wanted us to know our grandfather and grandparents there. On the first day of high school in DeKalb County, Shamrock High School, I had 6 classes. Every one of my teachers asked me if I was related to little Mary Phagan, and proudly I said yes. But my mind couldn't settle down. I got back home and I said to Daddy, there's more to this story than what you told me, because every one of my teachers asked me if I was related. He said, yes, there is more to the story, but at that time when you found out, so I'm 15, he said, when you were 13 and came home, he said, I just didn't think that you needed to know some of the things that went on with her murder. So then he asked me, do you want to research it? And I said, yes, sir, I would. So my mom, I couldn't drive at the time, so mom took me to the Georgia Archives, that was called, in downtown Atlanta. And we went. Oh my God, I get
Well,
shaky.
real quick, Mary, didn't you say? I believe you said your mother didn't even know about
No,
the whole
no, she
situation
did not.
either.
No, she was never told. Nobody talked about it. It was a sentence of silence that great grandmother Fanny Phagan Coleman, had given the family, that they were not allowed to talk about it to reporters, to book writers, anything. We were not allowed. But she didn't know it either. So she was just as interested as I was, like, what the heck is going on here? So the one thing that so we went, and there was a 12-foot photo or stand of the lynching of Leo Frank. Well, it shook me up pretty bad. I mean, I'm 15 and I've never seen a lynching before, and it was awful. It was terrifying. But I researched, and Mom and I researched. I have a library here that Mom and I collected over the years. So it is really important for people to know that most of the historians that have written about this case, except for maybe 3, are the same religious faith as Leo Frank. I had no idea he was Jewish. So then I
Hmm.
found out he was Jewish. Dad told me he was Jewish, and he said he was a sexual pervert. And I said, well, what is a sexual pervert? He said, I want you to go get the dictionary. This is just my father's style with me. He said, you go get the dictionary and you read what a sexual pervert is. And I thought, wow, that guy is something. That's terrible what he did to her. Dad gave me the book, A Little Girl is Dead by Harry Golden, and said this is the first book that the family had really said, or most people claimed that it was the truth. Again, Harry Golden was Jewish himself. He was also had some legal issues, and he and Leonard Dinnerstein, a professor from Arizona who is also Jewish, in 1965, he wrote a thesis. Amazingly, the original trial's transcript, because they sent in researchers and editors and all these people to Atlanta to get all the information, the trial transcript disappeared after their books were written. There is no trial transcript.
Funny
So
how that happens.
uh, it was
Awfully convenient.
amazing. It's amazing. I'm like, what? But there is what they call a brief of evidence. It's a review, and I have a copy of that. And that's what I studied mostly. Didn't have access. Well, let me go back a little bit, and so that you guys can
Yeah,
understand.
I
My
wanted.
father
Yeah,
did
I was
that.
hoping maybe we could frame it
Yeah,
starting with sort of the formation of the ADL, and kind of maybe
yeah,
take it from there chronologically, because I think there's so much to get into, right? And I know the most modern things are going to be the most poignant, but
yes,
just to give the background to the audience.
yeah. So anyway, what happened? You have to go back to the original newspaper accounts, in my personal opinion in order to study this case. And of course, they weren't available back then when I was 15, 16, and 17. But Daddy and I went to Georgia State Library and they had the microfilm of that. So I started reading the newspaper articles and I said, Dad, he's Jewish. What is the big deal with this about him being Jewish? And now they're saying that the book is saying that he was convicted because of anti-Semitism. I don't understand. He says, what don't you understand? I said, look at these articles. He said, what do you mean? I said, not one time of the Atlanta Constitution, the Atlanta Georgian, or the Atlanta Journal is it ever mentioned that Leo Frank is Jewish. Never mentioned.
The most interesting thing I remember picking out is that when you were talking about the trial, I remember hearing you say the only anti-Semitic thing that happened was when the mother of Leo Frank accused the solicitor of being a stupid goy. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
true. On August 14th, the newspapers reported in 1913, he was cross-examining a person, and he said something about getting close to the legs, between the legs, if you get my meaning. And the mother of Leo Frank shouted out, and neither did you, you Gentile dog. And
Wow.
that's the
I had
time
just written that down a half hour ago. That's wild. And then I believe you said she was removed after
Yes.
that, which
She was-
shows how strict they were back then. Because nowadays, I'm sure they'd probably be like, "Oh, it's okay."
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. I think where you're getting at, Mary, is that nobody on your side was like, he's Jewish, or anything for the most part. But she comes out and says, "You Gentile dog," which
Right.
is funny
And then,
how that
yes,
works.
right. And then on the last day of the trial, and I'll tell you what the defense it was, and you'll be more interested in that too. That has never come out. Was the defense on the last day of the trial had some cross-examinees coming in talking about the trolley conductor George Conley, and quoted him as saying, "And I would kill that damn Jew and hang him too." And that's how the trial ended with the defense. That they brought the Jewish isness out in the court, and that was how the trial ended. What happened with the defense people, what you need to know, were very, very Southern, very, oh gosh, they were top of the top lawyers in the state of Georgia. And their defense was that Leo Frank was white privilege and that a white man would not do the things that he did to her, rape her brutally and murder her. So that was their defense was white privilege, and that the black man, Jim Conley, did it. And that was their defense. And they say that in the defense, in the articles that you have to read that has the questions and the answers. So I'm putting all this stuff together at 15, 16, and 17, and I'm saying, Daddy, this isn't our story. Why are all these people writing about this and not telling the truth? He said, because they're not going to the original documentation, honey, and you are. And so we made copies of the microfilm, and that's how I wrote my book in 1988, was because I had all the statements with the questions regarding Jim Conley. There was no courtroom after. There was nothing like Hang the Jew. There's so many hoaxes, and I hope we can get into those
And
later.
Mary, what's
Oh,
awesome is
please.
your dad. It's actually the first note I wrote down was you said your dad said that you need to form your own opinion from
Yes.
researching it.
And I did. And he trusted me
Oh,
because,
I know you did.
yeah, he
And
trusted
also, I
me
just
to
want to
make
say
up my
thank you
own mind. And he
being here,
refused.
Mary. I just want to say thank you for being here and thank you for your bravery for speaking out on this. Because from the interview with Jake, I could tell you were pissed off, or you want to set the record straight, so to say, because of all these over the decades, which we'll get into, just all the misconceptions and all the lies, which is just absolutely insane.
Right. So how the ADL formed was he was convicted, sentenced to hang by Judge Roan, and on a certain date, and they got all that. Then they did all the appeals process and everything. But what happened right after the trial, I will also tell you that there's so many claims that all these people and all these newspapers spread propaganda and sensationalism. I will tell you this. The New York Times only printed 5 articles during the whole goddamn trial. That's it. Nobody else printed the stories. It was the Atlanta papers. That's it. Ironically, the Atlanta papers, all 3 editors were of the Jewish faith. They were pro-Frank, but nobody says that. And I discovered that. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. And I back up everything with evidence in the revision of the book. I added 19 chapters, I think, of all the stuff that's been going on since 1982 and 83. So it's amazing what they're doing, what they've done over the years.
Well, and they claim the trial was anti-Semitic. Wasn't
No,
there 4 Jews on the jury?
that was
Yep.
the grand jury, not the jury itself, the grand jury. Yes,
Ah,
that's correct. So there's a difference. And what you all have to realize, Jim Conley did not testify at the grand jury. Nobody knew about Jim Conley.
Yeah, I wrote that down as well. That's very interesting, and it's one of the most interesting things. And I circled it is what you already said was how their defense was white privilege, and most people in here know that Jews can masquerade as white when they want to, and not white when they don't want to, which is what's very interesting about how they chose to go down that path for their defense. And
well,
I
they're
do
an
want people to
upstanding white man
understand.
until that defense doesn't work, right, Keith? And then suddenly the defense is anti-Semitism when
Right.
being an
Good
upstanding white
point.
man wasn't the effective defense.
And
Yeah,
I do want people to understand that this was, 1913. This was the Jim Crow South. So,
right.
when they're saying this was rigged, the ADL and all this and that, back then, obviously, there was actual racism back then. They would, at any chance, convict a black person of doing something like this if there was even a shred of actual evidence. But that, in my opinion, also just shows how much evidence was against Leo in the whole case because again, this is the Jim Crow South in the mid 1910s, and of course Leo got convicted, and then we'll get into all the what came afterwards. But yeah, it is very interesting how they went with that white privilege part of it, and then like you said, Canadian, is a good point. Then they transitioned to it's anti-Semitic. So it's which one is it?
And the anti-Semitism came from his rabbi, Marx. He trained up there to New York and told them that he was convicted because he was Jewish. That's how that started. So that's the beginning of the ADL and how that started. And these were very, very wealthy individuals that owned the newspapers. And they were even made comments about Leo Frank that they weren't even sure if he was a homosexual or what. But they didn't care if he fell down and broke his neck. But the anti-Semitism has stuck for all these years. Finally, it has broken, though. I want you guys to know that it's no longer accepted that there was anti-Semitism at the trial, and that came out in 2003 with Steve Oney's book, "And the Dead Shall Rise," the lynching and the murder of Mary Phagan and the lynching of Leo Frank. And he is the ADL's expert, but nobody says that from 2003 on. They just ignore it. Just have more people writing the books with the historians who are the same religious faith. Steve Oney was not Jewish. So it was really interesting to me that that wasn't really covered. Today, it has changed with this exoneration attempt, with the fact that there was an anti-Semitism at the trial and there was no hang the Jew. And those are all the hoaxes that if I have time, I'd like to go over every single one
Oh
of them.
yeah, absolutely. I want to get into those hoaxes, and I don't want to
Yes.
leave the trial,
No.
until we've set the preface properly. So one of the things I've made note of, and maybe you can elaborate on this, was that even before the trial, Leo Frank attempted to frame 3 other people in the investigation leading up to the trial. Is that accurate? Two
That
two
is
black men and a white man. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's very accurate. And one of them was a personal friend of the Phagan family. He grew up with Mary, and he was part of the family since Mary was age 4. Gant, Gant, and he left his shoes there. Most people don't say this about Leo Frank. They just say he was arrested. There were 4 other people that were arrested before Leo Frank was arrested. Leo Frank commented to the detectives about Gant and how close he was to Mary. Now remember, he said he didn't know her, but yet he knew this man, had
Wow.
connections, had connections. It's all in the newspaper accounts. It's all in there. I'm telling you. Oh, by the way, I do have all the microfilm. I bought all the microfilm from those newspapers, and I do have a collection here at Georgia State University of the truth. So,
Yeah, he said he didn't know her, but he passed. I believe he
yes,
said with Jake that he passed her all the time and on the streets going, I believe, to the pencil factory and stuff. And I did not know that he. So you're basically saying he blamed a family friend,
yes.
essentially. That is
He
next
was
level.
trying to direct that to them. He directed the first one, I believe. Oh, I can't remember his name. I can see it, but I can't remember his name. But anyway, there was Newt Lee, who was the night watchman, and he was African American, and Jim Conley, and then Gant, and there was one more other. There was another person for, I want to say he was an African American. Snowball is what I think his name is. Gordon Bailey, I think. But anyway, he accused them or gave the detectives of enough information to go and arrest them. But yet he doesn't know little Mary Phagan at all, and he passed her her station every day when he had to go to the restroom on the second floor.
And then during the trial, I made note of this as well. Was this during the trial or after the trial in this kind of like revisionist history where they began painting Mary Phagan as this sort of like voluptuous seductress? By the way, when we say these words, audience, keep in mind she's 13 and they're trying to paint her as this. But was this during the trial they were trying to do this, or did this come after? I'm sorry, my notes are a little.
That's okay. Many years after, and Steve Oney was one of them in 2003.
Okay, great. I don't want to jump too far ahead, so I want to make sure I have my stuff.
People were he basically started it, and now every book that has been written since 2003 says basically the same thing. The Parade musical, same thing. Flirtatious, going after boys. Nope, not happen. And I have the original statements from the Pinkerton detectives, which great grandmother says that she was 13. She was large for her age, which you know what that meant. She was big busted is the word that Daddy used with me. But she did not have her menstrual cycle, so she was not. No, yeah.
Well, and look, just for the record, I don't think any of us here will agree with the idea that just because you have your menstrual cycle means it's okay for some adult pervert who is also your boss, who's also employing you while you're a child in a working factory to sexually assault and rape and or murder. There's no exoneration of that just because someone has a period. But that aside, the fact that she didn't have her period makes it, I guess, even worse. I mean, to me, it's almost a meaningless bar. But
well,
I see what you're saying.
Terrible that they tried to spin it up, you know, and
Yes.
say all these things about her, like as if they didn't know she was 13 and she was, you know, a little grown for her age and stuff. And what is really striking now that I never knew that about the three people put forward. So that I gotta give a lot of. It seems like I and everybody in here and everybody in yourself, Mary, have to give a lot of credit to the detectives for actually doing their job and not just taking who Leo was just throwing at them, so to say.
Right, and they were very cautious and careful, and I found some information regarding the scuttle hole, because that's what his defense said, that Jim Conley brought Mary's body down the scuttle hole. Well, the scuttle hole is like 2 feet by 4 feet, and Jim Conley was a huge man. And the detectives, I can't remember which one it was, Starnes or Dodds, or there's several of them, but they all said there's no way a person can get there. One person, they had to go through that, and it was very difficult for one person to go through. So you can't imagine a body going through there. And truthfully, if he did use the scuttle hole, he would have thrown her down there, and the autopsy report, no indication whatsoever that she was thrown or had any bones broken.
Wow. So see, that shows they actually went
Yeah.
on the ground, did
Yep.
their detective duty, and didn't just say, all right, we'll take your word for it.
The other thing that they
that's
came
awesome.
up, the other thing that they came up with, there's a chapter in the book called the Leo Frank case, and it was written in 1913 by an anonymous person, that the defense did plants, and it is in the newspaper accounts again that they planted evidence. Bloody shirts, her umbrella, her pay envelope, that was all plants done by Frank's defense. But nobody here now in modern day times talks about it. It's never talked about.
What were they trying to get at with those plants? What were they trying to?
They were trying to prove that Leo Frank was innocent and blamed those plants on the African Americans.
And that's perfect. Let's maybe dive into that, because we're still in the context of the trial. The ADL has yet to form. So we've learned about kind of the history, what supposed happened, the three people that got accused. Now, what did the defense, aside from the posthumously accusing the trial of anti-Semitism 50 years later, what were they doing during the trial to try and exonerate Leo Frank that maybe wasn't above board or wasn't necessarily legal and that we were able to prove later?
I've got a whole section on that. That's one of the hoaxes, is the plants. And let me go to that. Hang on. I got some papers here.
Oh, good. Take your time.
No rush.
I've written it all out. You know,
No,
Well,
all that.
if you want to take it in a
I mean, they did things like It's Amazing with the.
I know you
if
said
you
in,
want to take it in a different direction, if you want to take it in a different direction, or
No,
go in
no,
a particular narrative path that you want to take, then by all means, I'm just trying to, in
yeah,
my mind, keep it temporally organized.
I can imagine how much you have, because I know you said to Jake that you had 57 years of materials that you handed
yes,
over.
yes, I did. So the plants was fake or framed up evidence to the benefit of the defense that he wasn't guilty. So the club not found in a cleanup, that was in the Atlanta, Georgian on August 1st, 1913. The Leo Frank case inside of Georgia's Greatest Murder Mystery, published by Atlanta Publishing Company, has a whole chapter of plants that were charged to Frank. And I list the pages 64 to 67. I have my evidence very, very, I'm good. I can prove everything that I tell you guys. Night Fell on Georgia was written in 1956, and they discuss it in pages 36, 81 through 82, 142. Here's Steve Oney. He does pages 179 to 80. The secret relationship between blacks and Jews, that's the Nation of Islam. They cover the case. And the lynching pages in 2016, that was the latest one, 38 to 44, 327, and 326, 327. So I even list the page numbers of where this evidence is coming from that I have. You know, somebody said I should be an attorney, but I don't want to be an attorney, you know, that's for sure. But that's what they did. Let me pull that book out and see if I can share with you. Where's my little book? Where is it?
Yeah, whoever said that's right. You definitely should be, because listening to Jake, you have all this stuff down.
Oh, yes, I do.
And you have the hard covers, or the hard
Yes.
evidence, like you said, which is very important, because they're going to obviously twist everything, but that original evidence is what matters.
Right. And then I just break it all down and say that this did not happen according to the newspaper accounts, the brief of evidence, it's contradictory. So I'm able to give the
Yeah,
truth.
could you explain the brief of evidence real quick? Because that was
Yeah,
very
sure.
interesting to myself.
It's 436 pages long, and it has all the things that were given to the jury, you know, the evidence that they had. And it's just a description of the case, of the person's testimony. No questions are asked. What's interesting about that is, you know, I keep saying African American, but back in that time, they were actually called colored. So the brief of evidence has that in there. Whenever a colored person was on the witness stand, they literally put in the brief of evidence colored.
Interesting. And the thing, I guess, so the brief of evidence
It's a summary of the trial.
Yep, because I believe you said that some of the evidence magically disappeared, I believe it was.
That was the trial transcript, the original
trial transcript.
Yes, and that disappeared in 1965.
So before we get too far, well, if you have more you want to share on the hoaxes, please do. And then the next thing I would like to touch on is the abundance of testimony. I took a note here that 20 different testimonies were provided during the trial of Leo Frank's sexual deviancy and perversion, his conduct to the various people. And I took a note here that surprised me, because you mentioned at the very end that it wasn't just even limited to women.
No,
But I'll let you touch on that. Maybe that's a good launching point.
That's true. There was 20. They say women, but it wasn't women. It included boys. I did an analysis of those people that testified, and there, like I said, there was boys there. I mean, it wasn't just girls. And the interesting part of that part of the trial to me is that the defense never questioned them. Never.
No cross-examination.
No cross-examination whatsoever. None.
That's very.
So the defense, they effectively allowed the accusation of perversion to go unquestioned,
Yes.
is what you're saying.
And that's what that Leo Frank casebook that was in 1913 says. It was the sexual perversion that got Leo Frank convicted.
Wow, yeah, that's very weird. Good way to summarize that, Canadian. That's very weird. They just kind of let that go.
Yep.
One of the quotes that really stood out to me was one of his defenders said, "I hope he gets free and then trips on a banana peel and breaks his neck, because even the people coming together to defend him or exonerate him, once they got familiar with the case, even though they wanted him to be free for, I guess, Jewish solidarity, also wanted him to die because of how disgusted they were at his actions. Although this isn't all of them, but Mary, maybe you can comment.
Yeah, it was Albert Lasker. He was the very prominent person from New York that had, I mean, millions and millions of dollars at that time. So, and that was the other thing that you guys should know. The defense attorneys were the highest amount paid, $15,000, which if you do it in today's terms, it's like millions of dollars that they were paid. And I'd like to point out one thing. They always bring in that Tom Watson was, part of the trial. He was not. He turned down the defense. He did not want to defend Leo Frank. He felt, he didn't want to do it, and no amount. He was offered, I think, $5,000, and he turned it down. He didn't come into the picture until after. Are you hearing me? After the conviction of Leo Frank, and that's where a lot of some of the anti-Semitism comes in, is because of his newspaper, the Watson's Magazine and the Jeffersonian. And by the way, I have all those too in the collection, the originals. They have slowly disappeared from everywhere.
And I believe you said a lot of the historians were of the Jewish faith and were smearing Mary
Yes.
that came in.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was that during the trial?
Aggravating.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Or I was saying, yeah, that's just aggravating how that works
Yes.
like that.
Yes. So, but yet the modern day era.
Not sure if it's just me, but I think Mary just cut out.
I lost her for a second. Yeah.
Okay, she might be having some connectivity issues. We'll give her a second to reconnect. But it's extremely interesting.
There she is.
Oh, welcome back, Mary.
You back, Mary? There you are.
Yes, I'm back.
We lost you for about 15 seconds, if you don't mind rewinding.
Oh,
I got your DM, Amanda. We'll definitely bring you up after.
Yeah, we have all the collection that I started collecting all this stuff, and it's just, people need to know. I have theses. A thesis came about in 1984 from a Harvard young man, and the tactics that the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Board and the Jewish community in Atlanta used in order to get the exoneration without addressing it. That's amazing. That story. It's disgusting.
Well, let's maybe try to jump to that in 1 second, because we're basically at the end of the trial now. We've gotten through all of the major details. We've talked about the people he tried to frame before the trial. We've talked about the various hoaxes that they tried to deploy during the trial to exonerate him. None of those worked. He was convicted by a jury of his own peers. His own mother called the solicitor a goy or a Gentile. So we've got all that as the preface. Now we're at the end of the trial. And let's talk about what happened. So as I understand it, and you obviously you can elaborate more on this, he was convicted, but then at the last day before the sentence was going to be executed, there was a visitation to the mansion of the general or the governor.
Yes.
And the sentence was, I believe, commuted. Why don't you touch on that briefly? Some of the scare quotes, conspiracy surrounding that. Obviously, it's not so much conspiracy as reality, but please go ahead and maybe enlighten us as to what happened there.
Right. What people forget is they don't mention that the Governor Slayton, who commuted his sentence, he got all the information and he wrote his own things, but the Phagan family believes that he worked with the attorneys to write the computation, yes, and that he was bought and paid for, and he did it the last day in his office. And he fails to admit in that commutation that he is a law partner of the firm that defended Leo Frank.
And wasn't he visited by a few lawyers that very night before before he decided randomly on his own volition, of course, to commute the sentence?
Yes, that's true. They had lookouts, and they knew who came and who left, and they didn't leave until way after midnight.
Wow, it is in many ways damning to hear these types of things. What else can you call it but conspiracy when people move throughout the middle of the night to work magic behind closed doors, only to come up the next day with about face of policy that kind of stands in the face of everything that just happened. So
you call it Judaism.
Yeah. It just blows your mind that it's out there, but yet none of the books relate that to the public because they feel like anti-Semitism is the worst, is the reason why he was convicted, and that is not true.
And that's
So
why
what did the
clearing the table right here is important, because like you said, it was not true at all. And then his own mother was the one that was being the opposite, the opposite of anti-Semitic, calling, I think, I wrote it down right here. Neither do you, you Gentile dog. I wrote Leo's mother, August 14th, 1913, said, neither do you, you Gentile dog. So it's funny how they bring in the, racism, if you want to call it that.
That's true. I would say it's racism that they brought it in themselves. His
well, and
mother
they
did.
use their defense was called, and forgive the French, Mary, I'm sure you don't like hearing this, but we're going to use the expletives here just to be to be a
Okay.
little bit of a shock value. But they called him a nigger and accused the crime of being a crime that only a nigger could commit. So that's how their defense wasn't
Yep.
even about defending Leo.
No.
It was about assaulting and attacking the black man who they wanted to pin it on. So they weren't even interested in defending Leo.
No.
They didn't
And
defend
you know why they
perversion
took that?
accusations.
Probably that tactic, obviously, because again, like I said, this is the Jim Crow South.
Exactly.
So, they probably thought we could just say, hey, he's a nigger and we'll get the conviction. So again,
And-
it goes to show how much actual evidence there was, because, obviously down there, I'm sure, it is what it is back then. Sure, white
Right.
people, of all any people besides blacks, but white people would love to just be like, oh yeah, well, hey, it was him. But they actually looked at the evidence and saw that. And then we can get into the grand jury in a minute, because that was definitely interesting about who was on that.
I know it's just amazing to me. And they not only said those things, they called him a lying, filthy, drunken N-word in court. In court. They don't tell you that Jim Conley withstood the defense team's cross-examination for 3 days, over 16 hours, and he never changed his story. They also say that he changed his affidavits 3 or 4 times, but they forget to neglect that Leo Frank shared the times that he said Mary came. He had 4 different stories, so I put that in the revision of the book as well.
So after the conviction, they went through a series of appeals.
Right.
And the timeline that's confusing me a little bit, because as I understand it, sort of as the lore goes, there was a public lynching that occurred. Now, was this after or before the?
That was in 1917. He was lynched. He was lynched after. No, he was lynched after Leo Frank. Let me see. But it was not part of that. It was after the commutation. That's when Marietta, which she was not from Marietta, she was from Alabama, and my great grandfather was a very wealthy farmer, and he moved the family to Alabama. And of course, her father died. Ironically, we're facing the same crisis today, of measles, before she was born. So that community in Marietta had 150 men gather, and they picked 25, but they also had diversions. They had a group camping on the lake. It was the first automobile done by lynching, so they had mechanics on the team, and each of them took a vow of silence that they would never tell who it was that participated in the group. But I knew over the years people would hear my name, and I have a list, and it's in the collection too, of how I started. They just say, "Oh, my uncle," and they were really proud of it. It amazed me. I was like, "Wow, okay, I don't really understand this," but lynching is not good for anybody. But that's what they did, and they were very prominent and well known. Now, what they're saying today is the lynch mob. It was a lynch mob that was anti-Semitic. What I found in the newspapers is they call themselves the Vigilance Committee.
Oh, that's where the Vigilance Committee. Okay, I have the Vigilance Committee with a little question mark beside it because I wasn't entirely sure how that fit into the story.
That's
so
how
that's
it
what
fits
they
into
called
the story.
themselves.
Yeah, so they had a planning group. They have a planning group of like 10, 15 men in the community, and they planned it. And then they had the doers, which actually went and got him and brought him back to the city of Marietta. And they say where she was born in Marietta. She was not born in Marietta. They wanted to bring her to the grave. I'm not sure about that. Neither is my daddy. He wasn't either. So, I mean, during his oral history, it was great for me that I could confirm everything about his oral history to me during COVID, because some major things happened in my life, and I found out that the lynching had all the members, or the vigilance committee is what they call themselves. And like I said, they took that vow of silence, but over the years, names have popped out. Well, if you go downtown Marietta, every darn street in Marietta, every one of those people was involved in it. Every one of them. Yeah.
So the lynching, did that occur after all of the 13 appeals had finished?
Yes.
Was this at the end of the legal Okay, I see.
Yes.
Now it all makes sense. Okay,
Now it all makes
fantastic.
sense. It's after all the, yes. Actually, it happened when Slayton commuted his sentence. That's when it took off. And he was lynched in August of 19.
Well, you know, something to be said about public justice when you can't get justice in the courts.
Right.
That's how it used to be anyway. That's how it used to be.
And that's what they felt. They weren't murdering him like they're calling him murderers now. The rabbi is here calling him, he was murdered. He wasn't murdered. They said that they felt that they were carrying out justice because the governor had been bought by the Jewish community to commute his sentence. And remember, it was his last day in office that he did it. Last day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Probably
this
got a nice
suspicious.
hefty
Aren't
pay.
you suspicious? I would be suspicious. Well, my mind was very, well, Daddy, why in the heck did he do that on the last day of his office? And he said, now remember, he was a member of the law firm that defended Leo Frank, and that's all my daddy said. And that's the truth. And I even have the announcement of him joining the firm from the newspaper accounts.
Politicians pardoning criminals on their way out. Where have we seen that before?
Ah, I know where that came from. It just happened to us, didn't it?
That's right.
Uh-huh.
So look, so we've got
that lovely Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Yes.
among many others.
Well, let me, if you don't mind, I'd like to go over some of the hoaxes that we haven't had. We've done anti-Semitism. There was a hoax called Hang the Jew, and this came out in 1956 with the book A Night Fell on Georgia by Charles and Louise Samuels, and they were, of course, the same religious faith as Leo Frank. They said that they were sitting in the courtroom shouting "Hang the Jew" and outside and all that. Again, Steve Oney disputed that and said it never happened. There are no newspaper accounts of any of this. None. Mobs, there were no mobs. Let me share with you how they do the mobs at the trial. The Tennessean in 1982 printed out a section on a guilty man was lynched. And what they did was they took the original newspaper account. They had all these people trying to get into the court, and it says waiting for people to get into the, people were waiting to get into the court for the trial. They changed those words and put mobs. They changed the word. They literally changed the original newspaper account's headline. So that's what they did with the mobs. And that's how mobs came into it, because they literally changed over the years the headlines. It says impatient crowd.
Just quick action thing. Sorry, guys, to budge in. Lauren, could you message me back? I think we're starting our ladies' space a little early this week. Lauren, if you hear this, DM me back. Sorry about that, Mary. Go right on.
So what the original, I found the original newspaper article, guys. Surprise, surprise.
There you go.
It says impatient crowd waiting to get in to see Leo Frank trial. All the current modern day people take that same picture and they put mobs waiting to get in the trial. Well, in the picture, you will notice women. I'm sorry, but women weren't part of that. Women were not. Women had to be taken out of the trial during the sexual exploitation of the talking. They banned them from the trial. I forgot to tell you that too. So that's what they did. But that's how they changed the headlines, and it still continues today. And I'm just awed that people don't go back. They don't go back to the originals. What they're doing is they're parroting. A little girl is dead. A night fell on Georgia. Leonard Dennerstein's book. And I caught him in a really big lie when a lawyer came out about for the pardon for Leo Frank in 1986. He didn't read the historical resources, so he didn't do it.
Just to be clear and for myself also, because I'm having trouble on this one. There's sort of like an original sin of documentation that you said a lot of the so-called future historians were using to kind of bounce off these lies and continue them forward. What was that original publication? I think you said it was written by a guy. Was this the Harvard thesis of how to exonerate
Yes.
him, or what?
Yes,
And
this
that
was
was the
a Harvard
foundation of
thesis.
all of the misinformation we're getting in the
Yep.
various books that were published since then. What was the name of that
Was that
person
Clark
at Harvard?
Freshman?
Yes, that was Clark Freshman, Harvard
My notes are
University.
good.
Okay, let me tell you what happened with him, just since we're on his subject. I
Well,
think
actually,
it's
real quick,
important.
1 second, Mary. I just want to rewind just a
Okay,
second so
go
people
ahead.
know that the hoax that you just said, because it was kind of fast. Like so the hoax was that apparently people were saying "hang the Jew," right?
Yes,
And
right.
I just want the audience to understand that. So that was in the court case. They were
Yes.
trying to make it seem like people were saying "hang the Jew," which was a complete hoax. And then one other
Right.
thing I wrote down is in the case. It only took the jury 4 hours, again, in the Jim Crow South, to come back with the verdict, which again shows how much evidence there was.
Right. It's just amazing to me that they did that. They also another hoax that they that they show today, or the new people, writers, authors, whatever, promote, is that he did not have a fair trial, and that's what's happening with the exoneration today. They're basing it on that he did not have a fair trial, according to today's standards.
Unbelievable.
That's how they're doing it with the exoneration has been announced that it has been under review with Fannie Willis, the Fulton County DA. And she was working, well, that's a whole nother story, but that's one of the hopes. Let me get into that. The plants we talked about, the sexual assault, the autopsy report confirms the
And you
sexual
can't say
assault.
didn't have a fair trial, because again, and with the grand jury afterwards, he
Yeah.
had 4 Jews on the
Right.
trial, or on the
Exactly.
grand jury. So there you go.
Right. Bite marks came up in the 60s from a French writer, Pierre Van Fassoon, where he said he was in Atlanta in the 1920s and he discovered that there was bite marks and x-rays. Well, I did my research. I thought, there's just no way, Daddy had mentioned that that it had been talked about, but he wasn't sure. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to confirm, because I said, Daddy, did she have bite marks on her? And he said, well, according to what he heard. Now you got to remember, we didn't have any documentation back then, or whatever, with Daddy and I. And it was decided that what happened with the bite marks, Georgia did not use x-rays in a case until the 1950s. So the guy was lying through his teeth. And he said he was threatened, but there were no bite marks on the autopsy. Even Governor Slayton admitted it in his commutation. He said there's nothing, because it went crazy because they exhumed her body for a second time in order to verify, because they heard that she was on drugs and all this stuff. Come on, people, come on. Just gets so aggravating for me, the way that they did everything back then. And if they want to talk about sensationalizing it, they sensationalize it, against Mary Phagan.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Just one second, Keith. Yeah, I did look into this. So the X-rays were used in the early 20s and 30s, even in court submissions, even out of Georgia. However, this case did not have any X-rays. There was nothing registered in any of the court documents. None of the news articles covered it. There is no mention of X-rays being done on Mary Phagan, and the reason for that is because it was determined that the cause of death was strangulation. There was no necessity to use X-rays because her cause of death was obvious, and it would have been up to the coroner to decide if an X-ray was necessary. So, as you said, this French author, who knows what his ethnicity is or what his involvement in all this ended up being, but for whatever reason, he just made it up. He just completely fabricated this information.
And this was in the 60s? He just came up with this out of nowhere?
He wrote the book in the 60s, but he announced that he discovered this information in the 1920s.
And you're right to be frustrated, because this is how it works. We all know how these sorts of people work. They'll, pay money to someone to write anything. It seems like they just kind of were throwing, shit at the wall, the old saying, every 10 years or whatever, to kind of muddy the waters on the whole truth of the case.
Well, that's true. And what I'm telling everybody is I'm calling them out. And I'm not ashamed to call them out.
I love it.
I can't handle this joke of a rabbi and former Governor Barnes. I have to tell you, they're very despicable people, and the tactics that they use to do this. It's all secret.
Didn't you say in 1995, I think it was Rabbi Labo, if I pronounced that right, demanded that you guys take the sign down?
He did.
And then they changed the marker themselves.
Let's wait on the marker thing, because that's going to trigger me, and I don't want to get angry.
My apologies.
That's okay. But anyway, So that was another hoax, was that the bite marks. The murder notes was another hoax. They said that Mary wrote them. Well, she had the most beautiful handwriting, and I know where my handwriting came from. My handwriting is exactly like hers, y'all, and it freaked me out when I saw, because we took examples. By the way, I have a team of people that I work with. I don't tell who they are, but we work, and they found that Mary's handwriting was not, she did not write them. My dad said she didn't write them. What's interesting about the murder notes is it says a tall, long, black singer and the night witch. I discussed that in the revision. The night witch theory is actually a German folklore, and guess who's German? Leo Frank.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, that's a good. Nobody has seen that evidence before, so I have a lot of stuff in there.
You've
about
got it
murder.
all, my friend. You've got it all. I love it.
And also the murder notes say a long, tall, slim black Negro. Okay, Jim Conley, Newt Lee only worked there for a couple weeks, I believe. Jim Conley never met Newt Lee.
So how would he know how to describe him?
How did he know how to write the note? They were dictated by Leo Frank. Also, too, my dad and I discovered that he wrote a tall, slim black. Black was not used by Southerners. What was the word I said was used?
Colored.
Colored,
yeah.
And that was a Northern Yankee type what they used, verbiage that they used. So that's who's from the North, who's, Leo Frank.
And then you said Jim Connolly didn't speak. Could you just go into that for a few seconds, if you don't mind? What the significance behind that?
Why he did what? Say that again.
I believe you said Jim Connolly didn't speak at the trial.
Yes, he did. He did.
Oh,
he was on cross-examination for 3 days, 16 to 17 hours.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yes, he did. He did. But he did not know that Newt Lee was a tall, slim Negro because he never met him. He worked at nights, and Jim Conley didn't work at nights. So that's another one of those hoaxes. The exodus of Jews, all this came out. These were all people who are the same religious faith, saying that after the lynching, the Jewish people in Atlanta moved. Not true, not true. In fact,
the Jewish population went up.
It went up. Okay, Knights of Mary Phagan is really interesting because even my dad said Knights of Mary Phagan to me, but I dispelled that. And Daddy, of course, has passed on, but I know he's proud of me for coming to the truth. They weren't the Knights of Mary Phagan. It came from the New York Times 6 weeks before the lynching of Leo Frank. And the term was called Knights of Mary Phagan. And like I said, they called themselves the Vigilance Committee. Not that. So that is a total thing. And they connect the Knights of Mary Phagan to the modern KKK. No, it was the birth of a nation. So I did all that research as well. Also, too, there were several judges in this case that said, I am one of the few people that know that Leo Frank is innocent of the crime for which he was convicted and lynched. So they all wrote these books in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Go ahead.
The original trust me bro of
yeah. So what they said was Arthur Powell is one of them. And he said, and when I die, I have a folder that will tell you who murdered little Mary Phagan. Of course, that didn't happen. Confession, and that his book was I Can Go Home Again, and that was written in the 40s. And then Confessions of a Criminal Lawyer by Alan Lumpkin Henson, he was one of them too. And he said the same thing. When I die, nothing. Never found.
Wow.
So what we think, those judges were all in cahoots with defense and the defense in Slayton, and they put together a story of what happened, but it didn't happen. Who they thought could have been.
And Mary, what was very interesting is you said at one point you were on good terms with the ADL, I believe. For a while.
Yes. In the 70s, my dad and I.
Up until I believe you said 1982, they tried for a pardon with Alonzo's testimony.
Yes, that's when it happened. Yeah. Well, they were still, some of the people there were still there, but they always treated me with respect, and I treated them with respect. I would get kooky people calling me and wanting me to, and I would call up there and say, is this a good person, or do you have any information on? And they did, and they told me, you don't want to be connected to those people. Well,
when you say you'd call up there and you mean the ADL you'd call up
the
to?
ADL,
okay.
I had connections with them, Stuart Lewin Grubb and Charles Wittenstein, and there was a woman up there, and they Betty Kander. They were very nice to me, and I trusted them at that time in my life. Of course, they all passed before, the pardon. So it was difficult because my dad had people coming over and they wanted to do a Remember Mary Phagan Day. And my dad said no. He said, you can honor her, but you cannot. And he didn't care if the KKK went. They did. They came in the '83 when that plane crashed, when one of our representatives got killed. They came and they honored Mary, and my dad didn't stop it. He said, anybody can do, they are free to honor her as long as they don't use anti-Semitism to promote anti-Semitism. That's what my dad wanted. And so, that's what he did. And he was a wonderful man and told me many things about it, like I said, orally. So, like I said, one of the things that he had always told me as a young girl was Mary quit the pencil factory. Couldn't find it for nothing. Well, guess what? Who found it? Me. The Atlanta Constitution on April 28 mentions that she quit work
I
the week
love it.
before. Yes, I
The
confirmed
best part
everything
is
of my oral history except for the
how
night
he
the Mary
said to
Phagan.
form your own opinion and do your own research, and
And I did.
boy, did you.
Yes, I did. And he was very honored when I wrote the book and everything. So let me go a few more things. Of course, all the movies, the parade. The parade is killing me right now because it's going everywhere again.
Oh, we can get to that. Yeah, I wrote that
They're
down.
all fictionalized accounts. Let me tell you one thing about the movie. What was it with Jack Lemmon and all them? The Murder of Mary Phagan. I had connections with a person who was in the media in the media business. He sent me and it was called Ballad of Mary Phagan. That's in the collection too, by the way. And he sent me the script. And I called him and I said, this is A Little Girl Is Dead book. So I compared it and I saw my notes in the collection of the pages of what pages they were in the Little Girl Is Dead book. And they denied it. They didn't want to acknowledge me, of course, because they were afraid I want money. I don't want money. I just don't want you to smear Mary Phagan. That's all, So that's what they did. It was that book all over again, and they didn't believe it. Ironically, when that miniseries came out, I had a small publisher that believed in my story and believed that the truth needed to be told, and that's when my book came out, at the same time as that. So, and it was a bestseller here in Atlanta for a couple weeks, so that was kind of cool.
And you're publishing that soon, which I hope
yes.
you'll give us a little bit of an update on soon.
Yep. I've got all my chapters ready for you to tell you how I'm doing. So we talked about the smearing of Mary Phagan. We talked about Tom Watson. We talked about white privilege. Yellow journalism was a big thing from the current media. Now it's all about yellow journalism. Well, when you read the articles, I mean, they had major headlines. Let me tell you, just like
I'm sorry. Sorry, Mary, but before you jump forward, can you maybe just define the term yellow journalism?
That was going to be my question.
For those of us, including me, who don't understand the term, so I'm not trying to pretend.
Sensationalizing the news is what my daddy told me. That's what he said. Okay. And the funny part about it was they were very pro-Frank.
So it's standard journalism today is what you're trying to.
Yeah, it's like the ones today that, did all the stuff that we're hearing about somebody not having dementia, kind of things. And that's how they did it. But when I read them, I just read it as news because that's all they had was newspapers. There was nothing out there, no radio, no nothing. That was all it had. And they just had some big, heavy, headlines, but that was about it. My opinion is the media itself says, they disagree with me, of course. They think it was yellow journalism, and I just say the case was sensationalized because it was a murder of a little girl that was raped by a sexual pervert. Now the term is, of course, pedophile, that kind of thing. And of course, the big story was Alonzo Mann coming out in 1980.
So you had to fight, essentially, it seems like, I'm just kind of gathering this right now, through a lot of BS, to say, and all this, when you were younger, a little bit older after that, but it seems like for decades you'd have to fight through all these, like you said, yellow journalism type of things, which shows more of your character, that you didn't, ever break where because you knew the truth and you didn't fall for anything or get, demoralized by certain things, because that's definitely what they probably wanted to do to you. See, I just put that together now. That's very interesting that, and it shows again your bravery and how much you again care about the actual truth of the case, and aren't going to let these people tarnish it.
Well, no, I'm not going to. And that's why the revision is coming out. So I've added 16 chapters. I'm going to review those for you because some of them are very critical as to what's going on today. So the miniseries came out in 1987.
Just a second. Sorry, Mary, I don't want to interrupt, but I just kind of want to, first of all, sort of catch up the space, kind of
Okay.
re-summarize where we're at for the audience sake as well as
Okay.
my own. So we talked about the history of Mary Phagan, where she was born, the events that happened, how it happened, the trial, what happened before the trial, about the various accusations he put on the three individuals, two of them black, one of them white. That fell through. He did go to trial. He was convicted, and a jury of his peers appealed 13 times and failed every single appeal. After the appeals were failed, his sentence was about to be commuted by the governor. After receiving visitations late night by the defense attorney, that next morning he was to stave off that sentencing, and as a result, a mob formed, and I forgot the name of the mob. I don't want to call it a mob, but I mean,
Vigilance committee.
The Vigilance Committee formed. They took Leo out of his prison cell, took him to the place where Mary was buried, and they executed justice upon him. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, and I think you should know that the members of the Vigilance Committee, there was former governor, lawyers, sheriff. The sheriff did the knot on him. No Phagan was involved in that Vigilance
Beautiful.
Committee.
And then after,
wow, Canadian. Can you go expound like a few more seconds on that? Just because I wasn't actually even fully aware of that. So he got convicted, he was in jail, and then the Vigilance Committee
Yes.
broke him out and then served justice.
Yes, it was a military operation. It was amazing how they organized.
militia, I guess, is the correct.
Yeah. Is that the correct term? Okay. Well, yes, and it was successful. In fact, they left somebody behind, and they had to go back and get him. But yeah, it was.
Wow, I never knew that. And again, we all know what Jesus says about little children and stuff. Throw a millstone around your neck and throw you into the ocean. So yeah, that's I did not actually know that part of it. That's
and they were very, very powerful
to be
people.
honest.
Yeah, and when the committee met to look at who they call it the lynching, so I could call it the lynching. At the lynching, the committees that was looking at it were members of the Vigilance Committee. I'm sorry, I just freaked out when I found out, and I just said, "What? No kidding, that's amazing." And what really amazes me, and think about this, the ADL put so much money into this case. But once he was lynched, they stopped. And my question is, why didn't they take all that money and try to find those people? And I think my opinion is they wanted him dead.
Well, some of the defenders even said as much, that they're so thoroughly disgusted by the person they were defending that they do hope that after he gets out, he passes, if he were to get out. So I think there's something going on here where there's this kind of idea of the Jewish people have to defend each other in public, but then in private they want to prosecute their own justice. So there might be something to that. I don't give it that much credence, because I don't think they would have formed their own vigilance committee and dealt with it within their community. But at least ostensibly, that is sort of the behavior that we're supposed to expect.
Right. So with the Vigilance Committee, it was very quiet until the 1960s, and somebody contacted Bill Kinney, who worked for the Marietta Daily Journal, and he told him, and he had a list. And
oh wow, was that ever reported, or was that kept under wraps?
No, it was reported when the miniseries came out. Bill Kinney did say that, and he told me, he said, "There's a list," and of course, my first question was a Phagan involved in there? And he said, no Phagan. I said, okay.
Well, if anyone had a right to join that committee or even lead it, it would have been the Phagan family. So obviously credit to you guys for taking the moral high ground on this. Although I think if it were me personally, I might have been involved in the committee myself. But it is what it is, right? Some people believe in the peace of the dead.
Yeah. Well, great-grandmother Phagan's brother was part of the group.
Well, what was interesting too, a few minutes ago, you said that they love to use terminology. You said back then they called, I forget what you said, but now obviously he would be called a pedophile.
Right. A sexual pervert is what, that's the whole, in all the books for the early times. So until the 1956 book by Night Fell on Georgia, everything was sexual pervert. And then it kind of changes, as we change in time and everything. So
that leads me to the next part of the summary, which is after the trial and the lynching, there was sort of a bit of a lull or dead period in this, as far as I understand it. And then came out the Harvard essay on how they could exonerate Leo Frank without challenging his guilty verdict. And that happened mostly behind closed doors, if I'm to understand this correctly.
You are
This was
correct.
in secret. The transcripts for the various things that happened in the courts or in the, I guess, in the filings, because
And
it wasn't actually in the
year was
courtroom.
this in, or what
This was in
decade?
1980. Well, in 1982, Alonzo Mann came up, and that's when
Okay.
3 Jewish communities filed for a exoneration for Leo Frank based on Alonzo Mann.
And so this is the Clark freshman guy
Well,
from
he
Harvard.
comes later. He comes later.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, so he comes later. So, I read it in the paper and I said, Daddy, well, I'm coming out. He said, go ahead, call. So I called Mike Wing on the board. He thought I was lying. He said, you've got to be kidding me, young lady. You are not Mary Phagan. I said, yes, I am. I said, I'm the great niece and namesake. They had no idea the Phagan family existed, the immediate Phagan family. She was my grandfather's sister, and he protected her because she was the baby of the thing. So I called him and I said, well, you let me know. And that's when it turned with the ADL with me, was in 1982, because they did everything in secret.
Yep, that's what I have written down right here. 1982, they tried for a
Mhm.
pardon with Alonzo's testimony. Parentheses, Mary was on good terms with the ADL up until that point.
Yes, and that is true. And then in 1983, in December, I was on the way to Michigan to visit Bernard's family. They announced on CBS News that the pardon was denied, and this state went nuts because they said he did not. The evidence that Alonzo Mann gave would not have changed the outcome of the verdict. Then, right after that, in 1983-84, Clark Freshman comes in. And they start working with the Georgia Pardons and Paroles Boards. And he comes up with this idea that, well, we can give him a pardon, but we can do it without addressing his guilt or innocence.
Oh, yeah, that's very important.
Yes. So what happened was in March of 1986, they announced the pardon, posthumous pardon on March 11th. They called my dad and I the day before and told us that they were going to pardon Leo Frank with a posthumous. My dad said, well, if that's what you all feel like you need to do. But he said it will never change the Phagan family's position. And my dad also, by the way, in 1982, we were allowed to go in front of the board. They allowed us to because they were so overwhelmed with the fact that we were related so close.
And so real quick, who was this Alonzo guy and where did he
He was
kind
an
of
office
pop up?
boy. He was an office boy of Leo Frank's, and he only worked 2 Saturdays.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
And the things that the Jewish community did. I have his testimony of his. Oh God, and he was in his 80s and something like that. And of course, they chorused him. They had to fill in the blanks for him. What they did to that man was a shame. Today, they would be convicted of doing that for a person, for example, like with dementia or Alzheimer's. It's something that our society does not take. We don't like that today.
Oh yeah, people definitely don't like that. And then
No,
with the Clark freshman Harvard thing, I believe you said they worked in secret for up to 2 years. I think you said. Wow, and that was to get a pardon, and they're working in secret.
Yes. So that's what happened with that. And then, things were very, very quiet. And then the movie came, 87. Then in 1980 now, Dale Schwartz, he just passed not too long ago, about a year or two ago. He and I were on good terms. And he came out in 1989 and he started the revisionist, I believe, of Judge Run's statement to the jury. He used what you said earlier about lying filthy to the, and that's not what Judge Run said. So that's one of my chapters. I call him out for that. That's the one I want, and of course it's the Atlanta Jewish Times. It's always something with a Jewish community article that they come out with that. Then in 1994, the city of Marietta decided they wanted historical markers, and they called my father and said, we'd like to have a marker for Mary's grave. My dad said, no, I don't want it. He said, she doesn't need it.
So that was in 84 or 94? 84, right?
94.
94. So, and he said, no. She has it's beautiful marble. It's just so gorgeous out there, and it's just so peaceful, and it is a beautiful grave. And he said, no, I don't think she needs a marker. And he said, why do you want to have a marker? And he said, well, that's the most visited grave. That's the most visited grave in the cemetery. And that's why they wanted to honor Mary Phagan. Well, Mayor Joe Mack Wilson, and he was a good guy, called my dad and said, I believe strongly that Mary needs a marker. And I would like you to reconsider. Would you reconsider if we write it up and you approve what's written? And my dad said, well, I really don't want a marker on her grave. I'm afraid that people might damage it, but that has never happened. In the 112 years she's been buried there, it's been wreaths, flowers, pennies, toys from kids, letters. I mean, it's just been a beautiful thing for me when I go visit the grave to see all those things there. And so Daddy said, okay, we will do that. So they did. And then they put it up. And then in 1995,
Yep, here
the
we go.
rabbi come. It was very secretly done. But anyway, the rabbi gets up in a meeting, Rabbi Stephen LeBeau gets up in a meeting and says that the marker at Mary Phagan's grave has to go. It offends the
I
Jewish
believe you
people.
said in Jake Shields he demands that it was
Yeah,
taken down.
he demanded it be removed.
And I have Governor Barnes written next to him. Was he mixed
Yes.
up with the rabbi? Yeah, okay, because
Yeah,
that's
he is
important down the
now,
line.
but he wasn't back then. Okay,
Yep,
he didn't
yep.
come into the picture in 2015.
So yeah,
But
so he
anyway,
stands up a rabbi and demands it be removed.
Yeah, he demands it to be removed. So what they did, and this is what I'm calling it, and I think that you would agree with me on this. I call it the secret, deceitful, underhanded, revisionist political marker change at Mary's grave by the Parks and Tourism and misrepresentation of historical sources. And it was done by the Tourism Committee, the Parks Community, Marietta City Council, and the Jewish community. So I get a phone call from a friend, and she says, you need to go visit the cemetery. Okay, what's up? She said, you need to go visit the cemetery. That's all I'm going to tell you, Mary. And I won't divulge her name because she was part of the government back then. And I don't want to, and she has passed, so I just really don't want to say her name. But she did call me. So I go, and they changed the damn marker. I looked up at that and I thought, that's not the marker. What the heck happened here? So I called Bill
And
Kenny. I called Bill Kenny and
really
said, come
quickly,
over
Mary,
here. Yeah.
The marker for those is kind of like the headstone. It is a message left in monument or in memorial to the dead. And Mary, do you want to maybe tell the audience what the marker said originally and then what they changed it to?
Oh God, I have to find it. I didn't.
And so real quick, Mary, so they demanded that it
Yeah.
was taken down, and then
Mhm.
so they were probably, I'm assuming, not like given the
No
green light to take it
publications.
down,
I was all
and
done
then
in
they did it
secret.
themselves.
Yes, they did it themselves. Well, the guy of the in charge of that said that he felt pressured by the Jewish community to change the marker.
But
I'm
let's
sure he
just
did.
put this in context. Imagine that there is a Chinese-owned company, and your son or daughter was raped and murdered by this Chinaman, and then years later, a Chinese advocacy group comes along and says that's xenophobic. Whatever marker you put on your child's grave is xenophobic, and so without telling you, without addressing you, without seeking your permission, they change the marker on your family's grave to something that suits their political interest. That would be the exact same thing.
That's the political corruption. That's the political corruption. Here's what the marker originally said, and it's sweet. Celebrated in song as Little Mary Phagan after her murder on Confederate Memorial Day, 1913, in Atlanta. The grave was marked by the CS, the Confederate Southern Association Veterans, in 1915. The tribute was by Tom Watson, set in 1933. Leo Frank, sentenced to hang, granted clemency before lynching August 17th, 1915. His 1986 pardon, based on the state's failure to protect him, apprehend killers, not on Frank's innocence. That's what the original marker said. Now, here's what the marker says now. It says, celebrated in song as Little Mary Phagan after her murder at age 13 on April 26, 1913, in Atlanta. The trial and conviction of Leo Frank was controversial, as was I can't see this, I gotta get up, as was what is it? I can't see it, hang on. As was the exoneration of the death sentence 4 days before Confederate Memorial Day. And then on June 23rd, he was abducted from prison and granted a pardon on August, and lynched, and he was lynched. In 1986, he was issued a pardon. Bamboozling the public, in my opinion.
I mean, it's just so
That's
disrespectful.
sickening. It's
this is the one.
disrespectful. Thank you. Thank you.
It's
Thank you. Thank you.
it's disrespectful. It's dishonorable. It's
Yes.
almost everything repulsive to anyone with a shred of moral decency.
Yes.
At the very least, even if they had grievances, they should need the permission of the family to change anything that has to do with a
No.
memorial for a family member. That is despicable behavior, and
No.
honestly, this is
And
part of
so
the
that
story
was
that
up
frustrates
for
me.
6, 7 decades, and then
Six.
they changed it.
Yeah, they changed. Well, it came up in 1995, and they changed it in no. The marker was only up a year. Yeah, it was
Oh,
only
okay,
up a
okay.
year. Yeah, it was only up a year, and then so then I'll tell you because what I did with it too. I got angry, and then I did something, and sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing or not. But what I did in 2016, because I had to wait for certain people to pass, I put my own marker up next
That's
to
what I
her.
put in parentheses. I put
Next.
1995 he demands sign taken down. They
Mm.
changed the marker themselves. Then I put in parentheses, but badass Mary put her own up herself! Exclamation point! Exclamation point!
That's what I did, and of course, there's still things wrong on that because COVID came in 2020, and I didn't know about the Knights of Mary Phagan, so I said the Knights of Mary Phagan in there. So I've got to go back and correct that one thing. And but I talked about her. I talked about how beautiful she was. She had dimples. She was blue. She was sweet. I finally put her personality in there. You know what I'm saying? And wanted
Hmm.
people to know that she was just a little girl. She's just a little girl. She was not a woman, a voluptuous woman like they're calling her
A
now.
voluptuous seductress at the age of 13. I mean,
Yeah.
leave it to the Jews to paint a 13-year-old as a voluptuous seductress. But sorry, I don't want to cast my bias too hard on this, but it is just so disgusting. You
No,
hear
but
these things and you have to question. You just shake your head.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head right now. So then something really happened really good. And this is chapter 20, the 100-year anniversary of her murder. The team that I have now, we made everything digital. Everything went online. All the records and all that kind of stuff. Transcripts of the newspapers. We transcribed by hand the newspaper accounts because I am not going to let that information go awry like everything else has with the case. Things disappear and all that stuff, and it's out there. So that's what we did in 2013. Well, the 2015, the 100-year anniversary after Leo Frank was lynched. Oh my God, that rabbi! And this is where the governor comes in. They had meetings at the temple van, whatever it was, whatever, saying he was innocent and all this stuff. Rabbi wrote a letter to the newspaper saying that he needed to be exonerated and all this kind of stuff. And so that's what they did with that. And then Governor Deal came in, Nathan Deal, and I wrote a letter to him and I said, he has no relation to little Mary Phagan. Why, who are they to judge the Phagan family's story? Why are they doing this? And Nathan Deal said, that boat has already sailed. So he was very upset. He tried to get a petition. He couldn't even get 200 names on the petition, the rabbi, but yet that's what happened there. Then the big year comes. So from 2015 to 2019, and
Oh man.
at a
Yeah.
dedication in 2018, they had to rededicate the marker that was originally done because they built a road. They built an expressway over where he was lynched. Then all of a sudden, I get this phone call again. Mary, you need to look at the news. I said, what do you mean? She said, you just need to look at it. The Fulton County Conviction Integrity Unit was established to exonerate Leo Frank in 2019. And Governor Barnes was in it. The judges were in it. Lawyers were in it as part of the committee to get this exoneration. Dale Schwartz was in it. I love this person called Van Perlberg. He was Jewish. Of course, those two were Jewish. But, I didn't judge people by their religion. I judged people by their character and by dignity and respect, as I was taught. And so I had a lot of respect for those two. And both of them are gone now. So that's when Governor Barnes came in and, he went on this tour thing and all the newspapers. And then what happened was Paul Howard got defeated by Fonnie Willis. And so it's been silent since then. And then Roy Barnes starts his campaign. In 2019, he goes to the Mercer Law School. Of course, they had to tell the students, you better show up. It's the former Governor Barnes, of course. And what they were surprised at, I attended. I said, I have had enough, Bernard, that's my husband. So I've had enough. I even flew to Savannah to hear Steve Voney speak. I said, they're going to see me in that audience. And he said, good for you, go. And, I flew out there and rented a car, did all kinds of things because I wanted to hear Steve Oney's side because, he's the one that said there was no hang the Jew, there was no anti-Semitism, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, he's the one that, says bad, smears Mary Phagan. So then, the chapter 25 is going to be about Jonathan Greenblatt. I don't know if you know what happened then, but it started in 2021 when the community notes and people were writing about how Leo Frank was guilty. And 99.9% of the comments were that he was guilty. And it continued in 2022, it continued in 2023, and it's continued till today. And that to me was just a big thing because he said that he was pardoned. They leave it as he was given a posthumous pardon. And they always said, yeah, but they didn't tell you it was without addressing his guilt or innocence. So I didn't have to do anything back then. Other people did it for me, which was wonderful. I felt like the truth was coming out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
one thing I wrote down, I believe it got you emotional in the Jake interview. You said something
Okay.
happened in April 26, 2019.
The
That's
establishment
when
of the
they
Conviction
announced
Integrity Unit.
That's when they announced the Conviction Integrity Unit on the day she was murdered.
Oh, okay. And then I
That's
believe you said
disrespect
you
to the
asked
family. Yeah, that's
Fannie
very
Willis for stuff and she gave you nothing back.
nothing. No.
And
So
then
then I
Roy
wrote,
Barnes, you said was her attorney as well,
yes,
which just
he's a
shows the
return with the
corruption.
Georgia Senate Committee, with the
It's
Georgia
funny
Senate
how
Committee.
all that works.
Yes, anyway, I'm telling you. So then she's being investigated, but yet they had the parade musical here at the Fox Theater in Atlanta in April, and they announced that the case is under review, and that's all that's going on with it. And
Well,
like a
the
Pete, go
parade,
ahead.
could you so I wrote something down about 2015 Coke bottles and then the parade.
Yeah.
Could you explain what happened at the parade? Because I believe something offended you. Because I think you said
Yes.
afterwards a UK reporter came up to you and
Yes.
apologized.
Yes, that's true. So in 2015, my sister and I attended parade here at Theater Square in Marietta. And Alfred Urey is the writer of the parade. And his father was Moses, no, who was his father? His uncle was the owner of the National Pencil Company. Okay, so that tells you that story, where that's coming from. And I had a reporter from England that came over to interview me, and he saw all my materials and everything, and he was just so impressed. He said, this is just amazing. He said, I've never heard any of the stuff that you were telling me. And he said, what you are showing me is incredible evidence that all these things that we've been printing over the years are false. So we go attend the parade, and during halftime, he comes to me and he said, Mary, I'm so ashamed for how they're depicting your family. He said, this is so embarrassing for me to be a reporter, but I have to tell you that I feel for you, and I know that eventually truth will win for you. And that's what happened at that, because I wanted to go yell and, scream at Urey. And I went down and saw Urey, and I just said, you have deeply, deeply offended our family. And I walked away. And he writes it up. They write it up in the newspaper in her Southern drawl, all this kind of stuff, and her sweet little Southern belle comes and tells him, tells me that. And I just poo pooed it, kind of thing. But I really did. I wanted him to know. Phil said, my sister Phyllis, she said, do it, go. So she encouraged me to do it. She said, this is our family that they're talking about. And when that reporter did what he did, she even said, see, it's not everybody that believes these people, Phyllis, Mary, they don't.
Yeah, that must have felt so good.
It did. It really did.
And
And
what was I don't know if you just got into it. I'm sorry. What was the Coke bottle thing about?
he had Atlanta Coca-Cola Company made bottles that said Leo Frank was innocent.
Oh my goodness.
They had
It's
T-shirts.
absolutely disgusting.
They had T-shirts. They have all the stuff about.
That's why you
Leo
had some
Frank,
righteous anger at that point.
And I am angry at what they're doing because they're showing my family disrespect, and they do not acknowledge the living. They only want to, they don't even acknowledge her half the time. They don't even put her name in stuff.
Well, you're speaking.
Absolutely.
You're kind of preaching to the choir. Obviously, I mean, your family's had the worst experience out of probably anybody in this space, but our group and this audience that you're speaking to is intimately familiar with the ADL and their actions. They call themselves a sort of anti-defamation league, but all they do is defame, slander, lie, and write wrap-up smears. And one thing that has struck me as so obvious is that this whole situation has been a almost 100-year long wrap up smear that has been going on and perpetrated by the ADL on your family. And it
Hmm.
actually exemplifies perfectly how the wrap up smear even works. So it is, you're a living testament to the things that we speak about on a regular basis when it comes to censorship and the kind of revisionist history and this kind of nepotistic religious bias that these certain groups have,
that they just won't let go.
their willingness to be shameless, to have no honor and no dignity in their zeal to defend each other, even when they know that they're guilty. And that's what's so frustrating for us, to see that a group like the ADL has so much power that they can even rewrite history on someone that has been murdered and then write plays, Coke bottles, T-shirts. I mean, this
Hmm.
is disgusting. They're capitalizing, literally capitalizing on
Exactly.
this
Exactly.
history.
Well, and censorship, speaking of censorship, they censored my book and they censored the Nation of Islam book. So in 2019, to combat this, I started my own website, www.littlemaryphagan.com. I have all the newspaper callers on there. And as we transcribe them, we're putting them on there. I have the brief of evidence on there. I have Rosser's final statements and Arnold's final statements and Dorsey's. So it's all there now. They can't get rid of it anymore. And they have really been attacking my website recently a lot.
Of course they have. And
And
I wanted to
we think
tie
it's
in.
from Israel. We think it's from Israel, from what the
Oh,
bots
it,
are
it
telling us.
definitely it definitely is. I wanted to tie into the parallel of, because I'm 99.9% sure the ADL was created shortly after that whole incident, and
Hmm.
then to tie it into today. Now we have people like myself, not from them, but other people that have been on here on JQ Radio, other great people, like Stu
Yes.
Peters and Official 1984, and many people, that Jake Shields, another one, who are literally just great human beings that just want to get the truth out. So, the crazy parallel is this whole case, with Mary Phagan now has turned into the last 4 years. It's, everyone's a white supremacist from the ADL.
Exactly.
Everyone's a Nazi. Everyone's this and that. And it's like, well, what for what? And especially the last 18 months, like I've spoken out, and I know Canadian has, everyone in here has, on, the genocide going on in Palestine. And they'll say that we're, not, they haven't came at us specifically. People, again, like Stu and Jake Shields, are quote unquote Nazis or white supremacists, because they're like, you guys are killing children. Can you just stop doing that? And it just, it shows how the beginning of it started with your family. And now here
Yes.
we are throughout the whole Biden administration. It was, white supremacists. The FBI was sending undercover agents to churches to watch Catholics. And I'm a Catholic myself. I grew up Catholic. I identify as Christian now. They're sending to watch people at churches and all this stuff. And it's just interesting to me how it all ties in together. And like you just said, they're still attacking your website and stuff. It
Oh,
just shows
yes.
they will not let it go. They really won't.
No, they're reprehensible too. They just will not let it go, attacking that way. But
And
we've
it
withstood
really
it.
is so disrespectful. Like, it
Yes.
really is. It's so crazy how disrespectful it is. But they just there is some chutzpah in the Jewish community. I'll give them that. They say will not stop on certain things. And it's not even like this is oh, okay, maybe there was some mix up in the beginning or whatever. No, it was, again, in 4 hours the jury deliberated in the Jim Crow South, when they could have blamed a black man, but they saw the evidence. And it's not some like little case. It was rape and murder of a 13-year-old girl, and they're still trying to this day, like you said, Jonathan Greenblatt and them, to defend it and to try to switch the narrative, which is just, to me, it was just it's just so beyond sickening to me. It
I
just
know.
really is.
It really is. So, my position and the team's position about the exoneration that's supposedly going to take place is that it's not an unsolved murder. Because, see, when I asked for the records, they said that it hasn't been, they're investigating it. And these are lawyers that have written these things to me that said that, you should not, that what they're doing is they're just playing their tricks, lawyery tricks, stuff like that. He was convicted. He has never been exonerated. His posthumous pardon failed to state that he was not guilty of the murder. There's no legal justification for any investigation at the present, and the sham investigation should not give any excuse for violating the open records request. So
Beautiful. Look, I'm not quite sure how much longer we're going to be given because occasionally
okay.
our subsequent hosts allow us to go overtime, and sometimes they do not. So we'll see how that goes. What I wanted
Who's
to
on
do,
after?
I'm
Is
not
somebody
entirely
on
sure,
at
but
seven or
let's
no?
maybe solve that in the group chats ourselves rather than litigate it in because ostensibly only have 18 minutes left, and if we have more than great, but I want to try and get through a couple final things and then open up for questions if we can have the time.
Okay.
So Mary, you've alluded to on the Jake Shields podcast that your book is in the process of being edited, that
Yes.
you've already submitted it, and that it's basically in its final stages.
Yes.
You've mentioned that there's new evidence come to light on various elements. I think you mentioned something about the planted shirts, the markers on the grave being, you have some details on the council's meetings. I don't want to ask you to spill the beans because obviously we want people to go and purchase the book and support you. But maybe you could share a little bit about what's coming up in this book, what we should be looking forward to, what new light are you shedding on this topic?
The truth and physical evidence and the newspaper accounts, all the materials that I have in the collection are the original materials. I have original materials now of all of the magazines by Tom Watson and all the books. I have a library of almost every book that has been written on this case, and a library book. And you can go through them, and you'll see all my marks and stuff in the books and say, "This is not true," that kind of thing. So I just present our view and just saying that how this world, are these world of people, the ADL, the governor, and I'm calling them out, the rabbi, how they, and Fonnie Willis, and how they're just politically corrupt in trying to exonerate this man that was so damn guilty.
Beautiful. And look, before we jump, so first of all, audience members, if you do have questions for Mary, you can go ahead and start to request for speaker positions and we'll start bringing you up. Mary, I want to just say thank you so much for coming to share this with us. And maybe Keith has a few additional questions. I'll give the mic over to him in a minute,
Okay.
so he can ask away.
Well,
and,
it was
and look,
I want you to know this is very hard for me to do because I've always been very silent and I've never introduced myself. Hello, my name is Mary Phagan-Kean. I'm the great niece and namesake of little Mary Phagan. That is not my personality at all. And my real life, the real Mary Phagan-Kean is the one who taught visually impaired and deafblind students for 30 years in the state of Georgia. That's who I really am. But everywhere I went, guess who asked me the question? I had superintendents singing the song to me. I have the Ballad of Mary Phagan, the records and everything here. It just never left me. And I finally realized that I have to merge these two. I can't be separate. I am who I am. And now's the time to really speak out against all this, this tragedy, this horrible, horrible murder, and the people that are denying it. And because they're so powerful and wealthy, they feel like this man needs to be exonerated when he was just guilty as sin.
Well, I obviously I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and bless you for coming up and speaking out. I think you're channeling something that is not just has to do with your family, but millions of people have been impacted by the ADL. They write policy that gets put into law. They advocate for the censorship and shutting down of various people who simply want to speak about the geopolitical reality of our world, the various socioeconomic problems that we have, and the various involvements these small groups have in these problems. And so you're sort of a kind of almost a martyr in a way, or at least your Mary Phagan was your
Yes.
great aunt. But in many ways, you've kind of martyred your life into this cause as well. And so for that, I'm deeply appreciative. I think everyone here is deeply appreciative. And I want you to know that you have our support.
Thank you.
And I've reposted your post where you mentioned your website into the space. So for those of you in the audience who want to find the website, it's now the leftmost post in the space. Definitely go and show your support to her. Make sure you give her a follow, reshare some of her stuff. Check out our website. And when the new book releases, Mary, where can we find it? Because you mentioned this has been censored already. Are there particular platforms you're publishing on, or is this going to be available widespread? Will it not be censored?
I really haven't talked to the editor about it because we're not sure how we want to do it yet. But, the thing about it is it will go on the website. Oh, by the way, my book, the first book, is free. I don't charge for the book. It's free, but I'm thinking that we're going to do print on demand. And that's where your people and everybody comes in, is to buy the truth. And then if there's enough funds, I would like to hire a lawyer to kind of combat this if I can.
So certainly, if you have a donation link, I mean, aside from buying the book, which I think everybody should do once it comes out, I'm certainly going to try and acquire a copy myself. As I recommend, if you don't already have one, to set up some kind of donation link, and if you do, send that over, and we'll make sure to get that posted and circulate that among our community. Because if you need money to legally represent yourself against the ADL, this is the type of cause I think a lot of people can get behind. There's only a few cases that have ever been successfully prosecuted against the ADL. Another one is going on right now.
Right.
I forget the gentleman's name, but if you ever get into any kind of legal dispute, I think this would be something I myself personally would fall over myself trying to get a little bit of money your way to support that. And I think a lot of people are the same. So
yeah, and I
keep
know
us posted on that.
a lot of my team members are saying, "Don't worry, we're behind you on this." And I just got to find somebody in Georgia that's willing to that despises Governor Barnes and the rabbi and the ADL, because they're so powerful, And I don't know. By the way, you should know that Governor Barnes' wife, Marie, as he calls her, Mary, uh, her grandfather was part of the Vigilance Committee that lynched Frank.
So
you know what I
think
think? I think what we should put on his law firm, we should put a sign out there that his wife's mother, grandfather, was a member of the Vigilance Committee that hung Leo Frank. See, and they get all these people that are like so powerful and everything. There's a lot of people though that are very disappointed in Roy Barnes, but I'm sure he can say all the bad things about me he wants to too. But this is not his place. This is not his place, and neither is it the rabbi. The rabbi is not his. He says he's his rabbi, Leo Frank's rabbi. No, he's not. So you have to do all that. But I don't know about the funding thing. I might look for a grant or something like that. But I want to sue them. I do. I want to sue Governor Barnes, the Rabbi LeBeau, Donnie Willis, for political corruption in establishing the Conviction Integrity Unit. And I think it's important that they realize that I'm not going away.
Well, we'll definitely get you connected. I know there's a few people that are regular speakers here that do have some affiliation with various legal representation. So perhaps we can arrange something. Maybe when you come back, I hear that you're coming back in July, right? Or is it June?
June.
I think it's June. You're coming back in June. Yeah. So next month to speak with our ladies' night. So that's going to be an exciting space as well, and I look forward to that. Sorry to steal the thunder from the ladies' night. There's a bit of a miscommunication. We didn't know there was a dual booking, but we're more than happy to have you back, and I look forward to you coming here and sharing more than you already have with the ladies. So it's going to be a great space. And if you do manage to set up some kind of donation link, maybe it's a Give, Send, Go, or it's some kind of crypto donation. You'll have to talk with your team and see what makes the most sense for you guys, but we certainly will be happy. We don't do this for everybody, but we're very happy to share this donation link and share the cause to get you the support that you need.
Well, I do have a couple of the team that are doing the Bitcoin with me for the future. So I just want to bring this out. This is not going to go away. I am doing putting money allocation, and we've determined I've got to write it in my trust. I got to redo my will. We are setting up a funding process for this to continue, and the website to continue, and to hire people to run it when we're gone. So it's not going to end. It's not going to end, so I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I can do that financially. I'm proud that I can get some of that going and preserve the future, the right future, the truth. So.
Well, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
We've got no problem. No, we've got a few minutes left. So Tanner has come up with his hand up. Tanner, welcome to the space, brother. Thanks for jumping down quickly and letting us get set up. Sorry for cutting you off at the end of your hosted session earlier. If you've got a couple questions for Mary, and Amanda's up here too. So go ahead, Tanner, and then we'll jump to Amanda, and hopefully we get a little courtesy from her next.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. I tuned in about halfway through, but I've been looking. I was like researching a bunch of stuff she was talking about and tried to like catch up on the stuff I may have missed. But it's super interesting. I'm from. I guess I heard you say at one point you said she was actually from Alabama, but my parents both grew up in Marietta, Georgia. I went to high school there, which is why I found it crazy. I had no idea this ever had happened, but I was looking it up, so I found it very interesting. Are you from Georgia? Are you guys from Georgia? You said you guys are from Alabama.
No, the family moved to Alabama from Georgia. Georgia has always been their home, but I was not born in Georgia because my dad was a military brat. I was born on a Larson Air Force Base in Moses Lake, Washington State. So I didn't know
I
any of my
see. I
family
was
from
gonna say
Georgia.
there was.
Yeah.
I see. There used to be a really badass lawyer named Lynn Wood who actually he filed law against I think the federal government back in like 2020, and he like had to give up his law license because of it. But my whole point is he would have been super cool guy to help you out if he was still practicing law. But that is super wild. I look forward into looking at your book. And you said the second one, there's a first one and the second one that hasn't been released yet.
Right. There's 19 new chapters that I'm adding to the book of all the things that happened since 1986.
Wow, super cool. And then I'm sorry if you guys are repeating yourself, but where will that be? Where will people be able to find that?
I'll be announcing it on my website when it's available, www.littlemaryphagan.com.
Awesome, sweet. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming today. It was super interesting, and
Thank you.
I hope this goes your way with the ADL because they are horrible, and they're behind all these freaking woke campaigns to cancel people. You know, that's their forte. So these people are just
Yes, I've been
horrendous.
very fortunate that they have not canceled me. They have not come after me. And somebody said, "Why would they come after you? A little girl was murdered." So I'm just waiting. I
Absolutely.
haven't heard anything negative. So I guess, it's just my time and it's the
I
right
think more
time.
that what's
Absolutely.
happening is they're building the foundation of their wrap up smear, right? So they're just putting out a bunch of BS, saturating the market with lies. They don't
Yeah.
want to address you directly because that would mean that they would have to provide evidence for all of their claims, which
Yes.
might break down some of their.
Mhm. Yeah, and so when you have the evidence that's given to the Bonnie Willis, the Innocence Project, it's all one-sided. That's it. Nothing from the family. Nobody can combat it. It's just a group of people that are going to decide. And
Isn't
they've all
she,
been bought and paid for. So
isn't she being removed or something? She's in like hot water herself, I thought.
she is, and Governor Barnes is her lawyer, and I think that's political corruption again there. But the Georgia Senate Committee is the one that's looking at her. So, but they don't have any legalese to actually get rid of her. I don't think so.
I see. Well, it's very corrupt around those parts. So
Yes.
again, good luck and thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tanner. Great questions. Appreciate you coming up and asking. We're going to jump to Amanda. Amanda, thank you for joining us. I know you're going to be one of the upcoming hosts in the future space. So hopefully you, I didn't steal too, we didn't steal too much of your thunder, but appreciate you coming up here.
Oh,
and,
no, not at all. I'm not one of the hosts. So,
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. I thought you were co-hosting that session.
no, but I just wanted to say to Mary, I've been listening to the whole thing. I'm a student of history. I always will be. It was riveting. I'm so sorry you have to go through all of this, but I'm sure she is very proud of you for what you're doing. I just wanted to say, one of my hobbies is researching President Johnson, LBJ. And what I find very interesting, and most of my research comes from Jewish newspapers. This one in particular, the Jewish News of Northern California, written November 2008. So President Johnson was born in Stonewall, Texas, not far from me. Leo Frank was born in Cuero, Texas, which isn't very far. I can't put a link between the two families yet. Um, but when you read these articles, these are not very old articles. It talks about his Aunt Jessie Hatcher, who was a major influence on LBJ and was a member of the Zionist Organization of America. And one of the reasons Lyndon Johnson became very pro-Israel, as a young boy, his grandfather and his father, they call them Big Sam and Little Sam, they worked very hard to seek clemency for Leo Frank. And the article goes on to say, you know, the Jewish victim of a blood libel in Atlanta, Frank was lynched by a mob in
Yep.
1915, and the Ku Klux Klan came to Texas threatening to kill the Johnsons. You know, and Johnson always says that the Leo Frank's lynching was the source of his opposition to both anti-Semitism. I mean, when, you know, his father and grandfather were very instrumental in helping to set up the ADL. So, you know, you've got somebody, even the president of the United States, who was corrupt and keeping this a secret. And Johnson still has supporters here in Texas. So I wish you well. I'm going to say prayers for you.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for this space, and thanks, Keith and Canadian. This has been absolutely wonderful. But Mary, I will keep you in my prayers.
Thank you so
So
much.
much.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, look, guys, we've got technically 3 minutes left until our official time slot has expired. So I don't want to overcommit our time. And of course, I don't want to overcommit Mary's time. So Mary, if you've got more you'd like to say, of course, you're always welcome to keep going. We haven't received any word that we need to immediately get out yet, but I also don't want to speak for your time. So whatever you'd like to do from this point forward is completely okay. If you'd like to, you know, take your leave and maybe go get something to drink, take a little bit of a break. I know it takes a lot out of you, and things got a little emotional,
Yes, it
especially
does.
over the. Yeah, look.
Well, the caregiver came in with my dinner and brought me a drink and everything while she's watching my husband. And he's, you know, he's been wanting to come down here. He says, "I'll tell him their story now." You know, he said, but I think I will take a leave because he's been, it's been 2 hours for him. So I just want to make sure I have to start getting him ready for bed and things like that. So.
Well, look, I think all of us get a little emotional when we hear something like them trying to form a committee to exonerate a man and the committee forms on the day of the murder of your ancestor. There's something deeply, deeply disrespectful, dishonorable there. But obviously there's so much to this story that it really tugs at the heartstrings, and it also just aligns with what we've been seeing in modern day times. So your story is not just for your own personal sake important, but it actually represents an ongoing struggle we have as a nation, as a people in various nations, I should say, with the ongoing censorship and this kind of one-sided bourgeois tyrannical addressing of history, of the facts, of even the justice system itself seems to be pliable to their interests. So more power to you. Honestly, we keep you in our prayers. We appreciate you coming out here. And on behalf of everyone here, thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with us.
I think I'm sorry that if I kind of overtalked everybody, because I just, you know, gets excited and then I have to, the memory just picks another memory. So I have ADHD, you know, so it's just really just gets all in there, and I have to go back and forth, and you know, I even have it all written out and I didn't follow it. So
trust me, I'm the same.
It's a natural episode. I just want you to know that. I mean, I had it all written out. What I was going to say, what I was going to do, and nothing, except the hoaxes did come out. So that's important.
I'm the same way, and when you're speaking from the heart, sometimes you can't contain what you want to say. Sometimes it just has to come out the way it comes out. So we really appreciate it. It was an amazing interview. You gave so much information. I've got so many notes that I need to go through now. On top of the notes I've already had before, so there's a lot to learn here. But really, once again, appreciate it. Appreciate you coming here, and of course, thank you so much.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Is there any way that we can post this to the website, or do you want my team to do it? Can my team do it? You send me the directions. I'll let the curator for the website post it.
So it should be on Rumble, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and get this segment clipped specifically. Sometimes the clips go a little long and you'd have to do some editing to cut your segment out, but I'm gonna try and get this hosted individually, and then I'll DM you the link to the Rumble space, and then you can download that video from Rumble and do whatever you'd like with it.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate your permission. That will help a lot because we have a lot of people going to that website. So that's great. Thank you.